Shelling hit a Kyiv shopping center on Monday morning, killing at least 8 people, wrecking nearby buildings, and leaving piles of rubble and the twisted wreckage of burnt-out cars spread over several hundred meters. Firefighters put out small blazes around the smoldering carcass of a building in the shopping center car park in the Podil District of the city and looked for possible survivors. Ukrainian servicemen are seen at the explosion site as a result of a rocket strike into the shopping mall in Kyiv. Anastasia Vlasova, 6 bodies were laid out on the pavement as emergency services combed through the wreckage to the sound of distant artillery fire. Ukraine's prosecutor general said at least 8 people had been. "It is hard for me to speak because my child worked here. She was at work just yesterday," said tearful onlooker Valentina Timofeevna. Russia said the center was being used as a weapons store. Ukraine said there were no strategic military objects in the area. Neither report could be independently verified. The lie attack occurred as Ukraine defied Moscow's demand for its soldiers to lay down arms before dawn on Monday in besieged Mariupol, where hundreds of thousands of civilians are cowering from Russian armaments laying waste to their city. A woman measures a window before covering it with plastic sheets in a building damaged by a ring. In Kyiv, AP photo, Vadim Gerda, Russia's military, had ordered residents of the southeastern port to surrender by 5 a.m., saying those who did so could leave, while those who stayed would be handed to tribunals run by Moscow-backed separatists. President Volodymyr Zelensky's government responded that it would never bow to ultimatums, and cities such as the capital Kyiv, Mariupol, and Kharkiv would always defy occupation. "There can be no question of any surrender in Mariupol," responded Ukrainian Deputy Prime Minister Irina Vereshchuk. The US warned there was evolving intelligence that the Russian government was exploring options for potential cyber attacks, according to a statement from the White House. "I urge our private sector partners to harden your cyber defenses immediately," US President Joe Biden said in the statement, adding everyone needed to do their part to meet one of the defining threats of our time. Russia's foreign ministry said on Monday it had summoned US Ambassador John Sullivan to tell him that President Joe Biden's calling Russian President Vladimir Putin a war criminal had pushed bilateral ties to the brink of collapse. War criminal President Biden said last week that Putin was a war criminal for sending tens of thousands of troops into Ukraine. Such statements from the American president, unworthy of a statesman of such high rank, put Russian-American relations on the verge of rupture, the ministry said in a statement. The Kremlin earlier described the comments as personal insults against Putin. The ministry also told Sullivan that hostile actions against Russia would receive a decisive and firm response. Stalled invasion. The U.S. Department of State did not confirm the summons. But Deputy U.S. Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, in an interview on MSNBC, said Russia's reported statement just shows how desperate President Putin is becoming. Russia's invasion, now in its 4th week, has largely stalled. It has failed to seize any major city, much less capture Kyiv or swiftly topple Zelensky. But Russia has caused massive destruction to residential areas, particularly in Mariupol on the Sea of Azov, which was home to 400,000 people. It has run short of food, medicine, power and water since the first days of the war. Ukrainian Defense Minister Oleksiy Reznikov praised the city's heroic defenders, saying their holdout had helped thwart Russia elsewhere. Loading, by virtue of their dedication and superhuman courage, tens of thousands of lives throughout Ukraine were saved. Today Mariupol is saving Kyiv, Dnipro and Odessa. A part of Mariupol now held by Russian forces, reached by on Sunday, was an eerie wasteland. Several bodies lay by the road, wrapped in blankets. Windows were blasted out and walls were charred black. People who came out of basements sat on benches amid the debris, bundled up in coats. A group of men dug graves by the roadside. In one dark cellar packed with families, Irina Chernenko, a university librarian, said she had been there for 11 days. Loading, everything is destroyed. Where can we go, she said. We're cooking over a fire for now. We still have a bit of food and some firewood. Russia calls the war the biggest attack on a European state since World War II, a special military operation to disarm Ukraine and protect it from Nazis. The West calls this a false pretext for an unprovoked war of aggression by President Vladimir Putin. Nearly a quarter of Ukraine's 44 million people have been driven from their homes, including 3.4 million fleeing abroad, according to the United Nations, in one of the fastest exoduses ever recorded. Loading a UN tally includes more than 900 civilians, but the true total is unknown. Thousands of Russian and Ukrainian troops have also, and Russia's artillery-heavy army has suffered large losses in tanks and armor. 5 Russian generals have been a loss of senior commanders in such a short period almost unheard of in modern warfare. Officials imposed a day-and-a-half curfew in the capital from Monday night, citing the likelihood of more shelling. Britain said there was heavy fighting to the north, but that Ukrainian forces had fought off an advance, and most Russian forces were more than 25 kilometers from the city center. Talks resume. Ukrainian officials hope that Moscow, having failed to secure a quick victory, will cut its losses and negotiate a withdrawal. Both sides hinted last week at progress in talks on a formula that would include some kind of neutrality for Ukraine, though details were scarce. Talks resumed on Monday, starting with a 90-minute video conference. Apart from Mariupol, the eastern cities of Kyiv, Sumy and Chernihiv have been hardest hit by Russia's tactic of pounding urban areas with artillery, as its troops have done before in Syria and Chechnya. Kyiv Mayor Igor Terekhov said hundreds of buildings, many residential, had been destroyed in Ukraine's second-largest city. Kyiv will survive, he said. It is impossible to say that the worst days are behind us. We are constantly being ED.